NOS4A2.
What is up, everyone, and welcome back to our NOS4A2 After Show, where we're recapping the latest episodes in AMC's new series based off the book by Joe Hill. This week, we're going to be recapping episode number 4, The House of Sleep. I am one of your hosts of this show, Griffin Schiller, and I'm joined, as always, by my lovely co-host, Mr. Mike Johnson of Real School. Mike, how are things?
Good, man. Good. Getting in the show, you and I were chatting about this episode before. We were chatting about episode 3 before and how we had said, okay, 3's starting to hook us. I think if you're not hooked by episode 4, I don't know what else this show needs to do for you. So, this was it for sure.
Yeah, I agree. But before we get into that, we do want just quick disclaimer. We did have some scheduling mishaps, so that's why you're getting this episode later than we would have liked. Sometimes life just gets in the way, but hopefully you all are still able to enjoy our thoughts. We should be back on track next week. So with that out of the way, yeah, I agree. This was another fantastic episode, and it just kind of lends more credence to the show building to what I imagine is going to be a fantastic climax. It's kind of tricky because I totally understand why people would have jumped ship after like the first couple episodes, because it's really dull. Not a whole lot happens. But if you stick with it, it's really starting to pay off, and those earlier seeds that have been planted are starting to blossom in this show. I mean, we were just talking about Bing and how we weren't really huge fans of we thought he should have had an entire episode devoted to him and his backstory and stuff like that. But now, having seen episode 4, I kind of like the way they're doing it. They're giving us tidbits here and there, and the tidbits that they give us pertain to his arc in the episode. And this episode is by far Bing's best episode to date. And the guy, I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name again because I just butcher it every single time, but he continuously knocks it out of the park and continuously adds layers to the character as the show progresses. But anyways, let's start from the top here and get into this episode, and then really go through it as we do with these shows. So coincidentally, the show starts with Bing. So Mike, I'm going to give it to you, and if you can lead us through this episode.
Well, as you said, yeah, there's a flashback right at the start of the episode. We see Bing pretty much 2 different ages, I think. The first flashback is like one of his earlier Christmases. He looks to be about, 12 tops. And we see his relationship with his father. And, what's great about this is, for those of us who have read the book or read Stephen King's work, not just Joe Hill's, there's always something with the father. There's always that really dark relationship with the dad. And we see how Bing's relationship with his dad was not healthy whatsoever. So the iconic moment being that this Christmas morning, he gets a gas mask, the gas mask that he still has and uses to become the gas mask man, that faithful Christmas. And of course, then we see his dad saying, put it on, this isn't the toy you wanted, but who cares? And his dad's abusive. They pretend to be at war. His dad, takes the game a little too far, calls him a retard, calls him all terrible names. Exactly. Right. So we at first have a lot of sympathy for Bing, which, again, as we've discussed in the first 3 episodes, whenever we see this guy, there is that level to him, to the character where, he's the gentle giant, but you knew things had to twist.
He's got a dark side.
Had to turn. He does, for sure. So we see a few years later, and this has to be, I don't know if you agree, but it's definitely one of the most disturbing scenes we get in the show so far.
Just because of how, but before you continue, just because of how matter of fact it was. It wasn't like it was like inherently like grotesque or disturbing, or was like gonna make me not be able to sleep at night. It was just like, it was really unsettling because, as you're about to say, he just kind of goes for it and doesn't even care, really.
Yeah. So we see Bing hanging the Christmas lights outside, and he's using a nail gun to hook the lights onto. His father comes out, makes fun of him again, calls him slow in many different ways, shakes the ladder that Bing's on, and Bing just turns to him and pops him in the forehead with the nail gun. And as you said, it's so matter-of-factly, it's shocking.
Yeah.
It's a little bit comedic, but then you notice that the comedy just fades away. And I think, again, that's a good thing about Joe Hill's writing. You know, that style lends itself to a little macabre, but very horrific at the same time. So the flashback ends with him dragging his father's body into the garage. He's crying over the body because obviously he didn't really realize what he's done. His mom comes in, and his mom is super sweet, you know, to Bing, and says, "Oh, my sweet boy, what have you done?" It's a very, very sad moment, but a very dark moment that sets up a lot more of what Bing becomes, not only in this episode, but what we've seen he's been all along.
Yeah, and that flashback is kind of finished. They go back to it a few times throughout the course of the episode, and they finish it off a little bit later down the road, which we'll get to. But yeah, I thought this was an excellent opening. I'm kind of on the fence whether I liked it more than last week's. I think just because Manx is such a... Whenever he's like doing his thing and really like messing with people, I love watching it. But Bing is definitely the more interesting character. So I don't know. It's a toss up between which opening I prefer, but they're both very, very good, and they really do hook you in for the rest of the episode, as opposed to, I would say, the openings of the first two episodes. And so, yeah, I thought they did a really good job of setting the stage, showing, kind of alluding to how this is going to tie into what Bing's going through at the moment. And then also delivering that vital piece of information that we were missing from Bing. Because, prior to this, it really just seemed like for people who haven't read the books, it really just seemed like he was just this guy who was easily manipulated by Manx, but no, this is a guy who clearly has like psychopathic tendencies, and Manx was just able to tip the scale towards those, and really, I guess, cause him to become the gas mask man, if you will. But that being said, we do see throughout the course of the episode his kind of struggle. Like he knows what he's doing is wrong, yet he keeps wanting to say, like, I'm a good person, I'm doing this for the right reasons, as kind of like a way of psyching himself out. And once again, the actor Olafur Olafsson, he does a really just great job of playing both sides of the character. He's super intimidating, especially when we get to later when he kind of corners Vic in the basement and whatnot. That was actually very terrifying. But then also, when, like, the first couple of conversations he has with her, when she comes to his door for the first time and they're just having, a regular conversation. And so it's interesting, and it keeps you, he does a good job of masking those impulses, if you will. But like, the second you open that door and we get a peek inside and we get to see his just, house of horrors, if you will, we realize, this is not a good person, even though he thinks he is.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So as you had mentioned, the way we get there, there's a few minutes that we get with Maggie and Vic, because Vic is investigating what had happened to her friend Haley. Yeah. Because, the previous episode, Maggie had set up that the Wraith had taken somebody else, another kid, and she finds out it was her little friend. So she's talking to Haley's dad. The dad says, well, the police think that my wife took her and left me, and I would never do that. And so Vic, in a sense, you see Vic really kind of snap right at that moment. She has several huge character building moments, but I think, about a third of the episode in, maybe not even that late, you see her just go, enough is enough. Like, Haley's my friend. It's a sweet kid that I babysit. I'm going after her. So she, of course, uses the bridge to try and track Haley down, and spray painted on the side of the bridge says the House of Sleep. And as soon as she gets out of the bridge, brings us to Bing's house. And as you had mentioned, there's that great scene between the two of them, where Bing is very much like, oh, hey, Vic, like, what are you doing here? And he just seems like a very normal guy. Yeah. Are you lost? Do you need a hand? And you can tell he's a little bit on edge, because we, as the audience, saw what he had done, not only to Haley, but to the mom as well, that he's kept her prisoner, that he's been gassing her, that he's getting her to repeat the same thing that his mom said all those years ago, something like I love you more than anything, Bing Partridge, something like that, right?
Yeah, that was the stuff which I wanted to get into, was that we keep going back to Bing. It's just because it's a lot of stuff with him in this episode. But yeah, the instance where he has, like, he makes the Christmas cookies, he goes down the basement steps, and he goes to Haley's mom and basically he gasses her, and like, yeah, he tells her to say the same thing that his mom said.
Right.
Now in the book, I may have this, you know, not 100% correct, but in the book, I'm pretty sure he it's either confirmed or it's alluded to the fact that he either rapes the women that he takes away from the kids. He's like basically doing the opposite of what Manx is doing. He's taking the moms away from the kids while Manx is taking the kids away from the moms. And so I can't remember whether he rapes them or he does some sexual thing to them and then he kills them. But yeah, needless to say, he has a twisted ritual that he kind of goes through. And him in this instance is just like so twisted and different from anything that we've seen from the character prior to this. And it's like, this is really who this guy is. This guy is just unhinged, doesn't care. He's so vindicated in his beliefs, or not vindicated, but he's just like very self-assured in what he's doing, and I think that's the scariest part about him, is he's a guy who's doing these things because he thinks he's right, even though he does question himself. Like I said earlier, it's just very creepy.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And as you kind of touched on before, when we see these series of flashbacks, we understand that there was more to the story of him just killing his father, because as they continue on with the flashbacks, we see that when the mom is still trying to really kind of take it all in about what had just happened, she says that line, "I love you more than anything, Bing Partridge," and he tries to kiss her and she fights him off, but not enough. And yeah, once again, here's that darkness that we've been promised, you know. And what I really like about this, shouldn't say like, but you know what I appreciate about this is we were promised a horror show, and this again is the King's family kind of MO when it comes to horror, that it's really about humanity, the darkness in humanity, not just the monster, but the monster of what like people can be. So he sexually abuses his mom and then kills her right away. So we see that this is Bing's MO and this is what he does. And so, yeah, when you're asking about what he had done to Haley's mom, you know, the show versus the book, I think you're absolutely right. It's definitely implied because, you know, there's certain things that we'll touch on later about when they find Haley's mom, about what had happened. But yeah, I mean, this is, like you said, this is a moment where we go, Bing is not who we thought he was. Yeah. And it's definitely a turning point in this show.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I completely agree. It's that was definitely a lot of the more disturbing elements came from the Bing stuff in here. But I guess getting back to Vic and the stuff that she's going through in this episode, she just won't listen to Maggie. You know, if she would just listen to Maggie, things would work out. And as much as I don't really like or care for Maggie's character in this show, it's just I don't know. I get Vic's a little hard-headed, though. I guess that is in line with her character. It's just like I feel like after a while she would probably catch on that Maggie kind of has an idea. But I don't know. I mean, it's whatever. But anyways, I'll toss it back to you to go back to the Vic stuff for this.
Well, yeah, it's funny because, you know, we kind of talked about Maggie before in the previous 3 shows, and unfortunately, she really is just a plot device in this show. Yeah. The 4th episode is no different. You know, it's once again like Vic needs some advice. It's whether or not she's going to listen to her quote unquote mentor who knows more about this world. This is what you should do. You know, like, don't go after the kid. Let's put out an APB with the cops and all this kind of, you know, so like Maggie's like, this is how we handle this. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, we learn a little more about the world as well and how Christmasland is really, can't remember the technical term, but it's a manifestation of these strong creatives, that they can take a part of their subconscious within their mind and make it reality.
Yeah.
So that is how Manx is able to transport these children to this magical world. And at the same time, Maggie also says, this is why we can't just track him down using your bridge, because he's constantly moving, right, using the car, so we can't, corner him. But at the same time, it's not even like a real tangible space. So that was important. But I think if we tie everything back in together, the scenes that Vic has with Bing, there's a second time where she goes back because the cops basically weren't listening to her. The scene that they had with
even before that, like, because you're right, she goes back a second time, but before that, the real trigger was the interaction she had with her mother, which I absolutely loved. I thought that was one of the best parts of the film because, one, it gave her mom more texture as a character, and we kind of saw excuse me, what she was going through with the abuse, the domestic violence between her and her husband, or Vic's father, and seeing how she stayed with him because he wouldn't always do that, and then they eventually had a kid, and that just caused them to stay together. It was just a very relatable sort of moment, I guess. Like it's something that I think victims of domestic violence, or people who have been in that kind of relationship, can see themselves in the shoes of her mom. And so I thought that was a great way to throw in some topical relevancy in there. And then also it was incredibly important because it was it allowed Vic to see her mom, to see the good in her mom, which was really the big thing about that entire exchange. And her mom says something to the effect of, you need to see like the good in or the both sides of people. You just only see the good in your father. Right. And then so this helped kind of show the other side that she's kind of been neglecting for years, and even she admits that. But she, after that exchange, that really helps her see, okay, maybe there is something wrong with Bing that I'm not seeing. Because prior to that exchange with her mom, she had another exchange with Maggie where Maggie's like, well, listen, how well do you really know this guy? You've only known him through these exchanges. She's like, no, he's a good, and Vic's like, no, he's a good guy. But Maggie's like, right, don't you think that maybe there's something in there that you're not seeing? And so this whole exchange with her mom really helps her to see, to understand that people aren't always what they seem. And I thought they did that in a very powerful way that boosted the mom character, in my opinion. For all of her faults that she's had, I think ultimately she has been a mostly good mom who cares about her daughter, but who's been through some rough circumstances. And this is finally the instance where Vic realizes that.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's a very strong motif throughout the episode. Like you mentioned, the mom's line, it's something to the effect of everybody has a good and a bad side, but you only see the good, right? And yeah, what's great about that episode that line is that, technically that's also to us, the audience, because we get the rug pulled out from us when it comes to Bing, and all of a sudden we see he's not, the good guy that we thought he was, the sweet, innocent oaf. And so, not only that, but there's a great moment, I think, too, where once again, Vic has another turning point where she's back at her dad's with his girlfriend, and she locks the door. Yeah, which is something. And
she's not making eye contact with him either, because she's like, she finally gets it. Well, and another point that I think that line, kind of speaks to the audience about how we viewed her mom too. She's not only speaking. You're right. She's not only speaking to Vic. She's speaking to us as well. And because we've always, for the most part, we've liked the dad, because Vic's like the dad, and we've really only seen him through her positive lens, even though he left his family and has a mistress and whatnot. It's it's really interesting how they play with that, and how as Vic really starts to realize her dad's really not the greatest person. we as audiences buy into it as well. And so I think this show does a really good job of keeping the audience in Vic's kind of line of vision. We really are inside her head for the most part. I mean, obviously there's stuff going on with Manx, with Bing and whatnot, and that those are the exceptions. But for the most part, we are experiencing what she is experiencing through the lens that she sees it. And when that alters, we really get a sense of that. And so it just makes for a far more interesting viewing experience, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. So, yeah. So the other thing I think we need to touch on is, I mean, thematically, it just connects perfectly is you had already talked about it a little bit when we see Bing really turn. And not just because of what we know that he's done in the past, but, you know, we literally see him confront Vic for the first time. You know, first time when they're in the school where she's like, okay, what happened? And he's saying like, you know, Mr. Manx says that, you know, I'm saving these kids and blah, blah, blah. Like, he's not afraid. Like you said, he's kind of self-righteous in a sense where it's like what he believes is right. And then there's the confrontation the second time where she goes back to the house and we see him as, you know, what's best described as like a Batman supervillain where he literally becomes like the gas mask man.
Oh, yeah.
Because he has that great way of speaking too, where he speaks in rhyme. You know what I mean? Like, he's very quizzical and like clever. And it's
weird. He's kind of got like split personalities, you know?
Exactly. Yeah.
But even before before that encounter on the stairs, when she first enters the house and you see all like the porno magazines and the tissues littered everywhere, like we know this guy's a pervert. And like, if you've read the book, you know he's a pervert from the first introduction to him, because he's like, I'm pretty sure he's masturbating to one of the comics that like either Vic gave him or maybe it was like a comic from when he was a kid. I forget how that whole thing kind of starts, but and this is finally where we get that vital information that ties into his serial killer instincts and how he treats his victims and whatnot. And so that was just like, that was really like disturbing to watch Vic go into this environment, you know?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So yeah, we get that confrontation, which is interesting to say the least. Even more interesting is we get a phone call. Bing goes upstairs to answer the phone call, and you can kind of hear him muttering and saying, oh, well, yeah, she's actually here. Because part of the plot that we didn't talk about is the fact that Manx, having kidnapped Haley, and she's starting to transform into a little vampire, he finds out who has been using the shorter way.
Yeah,
right?
He gets it out of her. And listen, we've talked a lot about Bing here. We talked a lot about Vic, but the stuff with Manx I thought was also excellent, because once again we're getting that persuasion that he's so good at. But we get and you know, we don't know, maybe he's lying or something, but we kind of get a little bit of his origin or backstory, if you will, kind of like his relationship with his parents and how he was a loner, and how I guess, you know, if you believe that, how he relates to these kids. I don't know if I fully believe it, because I feel like he's just telling these kids what they want to hear. But the way he was doing it was convincing, and also I think it sheds some light onto Haley's situation as well, with him kind of explaining the stuff that he supposedly went through as a child. We're kind of, as a result, understanding what Haley is going through and why she might be enticed by Christmas Land and what Manx has to offer, because she's very much against it at the beginning. She's very strong, and she's like, nah, fuck you, I'm not gonna do any of this. But then, you know, once Manx finds his angle, man, he gets in there and he gets what he wants, which is just the most. It's despicable, but it's also why you like the character. Yeah,
very true. Yeah, and continuing that, so, you know, when he tells Bing to put Vic on the phone and they have a conversation, he's like, oh, I've been looking for you. And again, that charm is there. And so that's a good scene, because, you know, this is very much the first confrontation with Vic and the two villains that we've seen so far, where, you know, it's not this huge fight, this climax that we know inevitably has to come, but she's finally confronting all of her demons in this episode, I think, quite literally, and within her family, right? She really is. Those are fantastic scenes for sure.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Yeah.
So the other good thing, as we will see later in the episode, because, the rest of it, I mean, that's the most of it anyways. I thought probably one of the best Manx scenes was right at the end. So we've already seen
the Christmas Land stuff.
Well, before that, I should say close to
I know the general store stuff or the gas station stuff. Oh my God, that was the best.
It was
really great from his point of view for like his interactions with the cashier, but then also watching the demon that Haley has become. And I mean, you'll explain it, but yeah, that was wow.
Such a good scene. Yeah,
maybe my favorite scene.
Yeah, I agreed. And this is like vintage Quinto, where it's that once again subtle. All he has to do is kind of lift one of those giant thick eyebrows, right? And he can just say so much with his face. A great actor when it comes to these kind of roles. Yeah, so he just goes into the gas station because obviously he's refueling, and he buys about like 24 Pine air fresheners.
That's a lot.
Yeah, and I love it. And so, the cashier's just like looking at him like this, and he just goes, "I like pine." Right. And just, the moment of like he's waiting for the guy he's tapping his long vampiric fingers, and then the guy's like, okay, that's $36, and he just gives him the cash. The guy gives him the change, and he literally just drops the change on the counter. Like so many great moments. But the best part is, like you said, we've seen physical transformations, because the kid who was taken in the very first episode, we saw that he became like a little shark tooth demon.
Yeah.
But we really haven't seen, what they actually become. And so I thought this is my favorite scene in the whole show so far.
Oh, yeah.
Is a woman sees the APB because, Maggie earlier contacted that sheriff guy. He put out an Amber Alert because Haley was kidnapped. Mm-hmm. And so this woman sees it on her phone. She sees the car, and then she goes and she sees Haley, and she goes, "Oh, sweetheart, it's okay. Come with me. You're safe." And she reaches into the car. And of course, Haley, being a little tiny succubus, just sucks her right into the car. And then you see it, it shaking in the background when you see Manx. And then the best part, like I said, Manx comes back to the car. He looks in the back. He knows that this woman's just being devoured or ripped apart. And he pauses, and there's that perfect moment where he just goes, yeah. And then he just gets in the car.
Yeah, right? Exactly. Yeah. Well,
that's what happens.
He just backs out. You see like the hand go up on the window, the blood kind of falling down. And then as he drives off, you see blood spattering on the glass. It was great. For as violent as a scene as it was, they showed like just the right amount. They didn't like overdo it, because I think if we had like seen too much of it, it would have lost its kind of like demonic charm, if you will, which is, Manx is a very tasteful character for all his demonic ness, if you will, and his creepiness and whatnot. But there's still that charm to him, and like this entire sequence was just like the encapsulation of that. And you're right, we do get to see the results of that transformation.
Yeah, so good. Yeah. So as you had said, though, the real final scene, anyways, there's two, I guess we should touch on, but one is we get to see Christmas Land, or at least as far into Christmas Land as we've seen before.
Right. It's like each time he goes there, they're showing us just like a little bit more. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, he says to Haley, okay, that's it, child. Like, I have to leave you, because he can't actually go into Christmas Land. I'm sure we'll learn about the rules later. She goes to the gate, and is it the same kid from the first episode?
Yes.
Did you know?
Yeah.
It is?
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Good. So good continuity there. So he says, like, do you want to play a game? And it's super creepy because we know they're both little like immortal vampires now. And he hands Haley shears. And does he call it the shear for hobo game or something like that?
Something like that. But I don't know. All I know is I got Ush flashbacks. I was like, what is we're getting like some Jordan Peele shit in here.
That's right. Yeah. The scissors. Yeah.
And then just like the way that Manx just kind of looks at him and just like, yeah, it's gonna be a fun time.
That's right. Like,
it's
have
all
fun,
just,
kids.
yeah, it's just great. It's so enjoyable.
Yeah, for sure. And like we've been talking about before, thematically, the balance of the characters is really good. The balance of horror and comedy. And I think the ending is a perfect example of that, where we've got this moment that's kind of like funny and macabre. But then the very last scene is Vic finding Haley's mom. right?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember whether that happened before the stuff at Christmas Land or the stuff at Christmas Land. Regardless, yeah, you're right. Whichever one came first, the exact opposite tone kind of happened like afterwards, so it kind of like balanced the scene out. But you're right, yeah. Vic finds Haley's mom. And then, yeah, you know what? I do think it happened first because she finds Haley's mom and then she goes back to her dad's house and then that's when she kind of locks the door and then we cut back to Manx going to Christmas Land. So, but you're right. Yeah, we find Haley's mom buried in the ground and she has a nail in her head.
Yeah, and she's naked. So everything that you had implied before, that we learned about Bing's MO, the sexual abuse, the nail in the forehead. Yeah. So, yeah, very powerful moment because we see Vic once again snap. And again, Ashley Cummings, hats off to her. She's so good. Yeah. Really is. Yeah. And that was a great moment where, again, I think a less talented actor would have gone too far, maybe not far enough, but that scream was like believable and like perfectly timed, right? And you just go, yeah, I got that. Yeah. So
it was
really,
authentic. Yeah, I agree.
Powerful moment for sure.
Yeah, no, for sure. It was just, it was another instance of this show kind of like kicking it up a notch in terms of showing us more disturbing stuff. And you're right, tying it back into the thematic through line and the characters because that had been, how Bing killed his mom and how Bing killed his dad. And so it's like, that's his kind of method of choice for when he's going to kill someone. And it's all very enriching material and it is disturbing too. So I appreciate that. But anyways, anything else you want to touch on before we close this one out?
No, definitely my favorite episode, so far. And we had talked about it. Like, it is because it was, I touched on this before, but I'll give you what the specific reference was. Before I even started watching the show, Stephen King, of course, supporting his son, said that the show is flat out scary or something to that extent. And the first 3 episodes, I go, I don't think so, Stephen. I'm not getting it yet, right? Yeah. Which is, let's be honest, I think why most people want to watch the show because, the horror element is one of the most interesting ones. This one, we got it. We got horror, we got disturbing moments, we got that macabre humor. I mean, like, it was just superbly balanced, really well written. Definitely gave me what I wanted to get out of this show in the 4th episode. So better late than never, kind of like this discussion. We're a couple days late, but still better late than never. Again, like I said, if you're not hooked on this show after this episode, then clearly the show's not for you.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. I'm still trying to decide whether I prefer this one or episode 3 more. I think they both are very well done, and they're both directed by John Sheehan, who did an excellent job once again with this episode. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's just a show that's continuously built upon the previous episode, and it's it may not have hooked you at the beginning, but it's really going in for the kill now, and I'm all for it. Very impressed with this. So with that said, that's going to do it for our recap of episode number 4, The House of Sleep. Be sure to let us know your thoughts and opinions on the episode down in the comments section below. Once again, apologies for the episode being late, but hopefully you still enjoy it all the same. Mike, thank you for joining me as always. Where can everyone find you?
Well, you can find me on YouTube at Real School, Instagram at real.school, or Twitter at Real School. There's a theme. Just remember 2 E's in real, like a movie. It's a pun. It's a dad joke. You get it. There you go.
Well, and it works because he is a dad. So it makes sense. Only dads can make. Well, not only dads, but dads make the best dad jokes. But anyways, if you guys are interested, be sure to subscribe to the Men vs. Movies channel for more movie and television related content on a weekly basis. You can like us on Facebook, follow us on Twitter simply by searching Men vs. Movies. And lastly, if you like me specifically and you like what I have to say, you can give me a follow on Twitter at Griff Schiller. All right, that's going to do it for this NOS4A2 recap, and we'll catch you next week. Take care.